Today we're talking about be careful what you wish for. I think everybody here, at least everybody of any certain age, will be able to say there's been times in your life you really hope for something and then really wish you wouldn't have ended up getting it. I've got a story here that talks a little bit about that. It says a man walks into a restaurant with a full-grown ostrich behind him. And as he sits down, the waitress comes over and asks for their order. The man says, "I'll have a hamburger, fries, and a Coke." And turns to the ostrich, "Well, what's yours?" "I'll have the same," says the ostrich. A short time later, the waitress returns with the order. "That'll be $6.40, please." And the man reaches into his pocket and pulls out exact change for the payment. The next day, the man and the ostrich come in again. And the man says, "I'll have a hamburger, fries, and a Coke." And the ostrich says, "I'll have the same." Once again, the man reaches into his pocket and pays the exact change. This becomes a routine until late one evening, the two enter in. "The usual?" asks the waitress. "No, this is a Friday night, so I'll have a steak, baked potato, and a salad," says the man. "Same for me," says the ostrich. A short time later, the waitress comes with the order and says that'll be $12.62. Once again, the man pulls exact change out of his pocket and places it on the table. The waitress can't hold back her curiosity any longer. "Excuse me, sir, how do you manage to always come up with the exact change out of your pocket every time?" "Well," says the man, "several years ago I was cleaning the attic and found an old lamp. When I rubbed it, a genie appeared and offered me two wishes. My first wish was that if I ever had to pay for anything, I'd be able to just put my hand in the pocket and the right amount of money would always be there." "That's brilliant," says the waitress. "Most people would wish for $1 million or something, but you'll always be as rich as you want for as long as you live." "That's right. Whether it's a gallon of milk or a Rolls Royce, the exact money is always there," says the man. The waitress asks, "One other thing, sir, what's with the ostrich?" The man pauses and answers, "My second wish was for a tall chick with long legs who agrees with everything I say." Yeah, it's right there at the end, I know. So as you look at that, you say, sometimes you got to be careful what you wish for. I'd read lots of genie stories. Those were lots of them. Of the genie stories, come up with a lot of these, be careful what you wish for, but I'd never seen that one before. Today, as we're going to look at Habakkuk, one of the most famous books in all the Bible, I'm sure you know it backwards and forwards. We're going to see a story here of being careful what you wish for. So if you turn to the book of Habakkuk, chapter 1 and verse 1, we're going to read. It's a little bit of a reading today. Chapter 1, verse 1 from Habakkuk. We'll see why we're saying be careful what you wish for. Habakkuk's one of God's prophets. And it says in verse 1, the oracle, it's just a prophecy, that's all it is, it's another word for a prophecy, that Habakkuk, the prophet, received. Now, beginning in verse 2, you see that Habakkuk's got this thing that he's a little upset about. He says, "How long, O Lord, must I call for help? But you do not listen. Or cry out to you, violence, but you do not save. Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrong? Destruction and violence are before me. There is strife and conflict abounds. Therefore the law is paralyzed, and justice never prevails. The wicked hem in the righteous, so that justice is perverted." Now, before we read any farther, how many of you felt like that before? You've looked at the world and said, "God, I've prayed and I've hoped and I've wished and I've begged and I've pleaded that you would change this world, make it a better place, come against the criminals and those who steal and those who hurt and those who defraud others and would do anything just to get ahead. God, why don't you do anything about it?" Many of us can echo exactly how the prophet feels here of this complete frustration at what's going on in the world around us. Sickness and disasters and hurt. And we're saying, "God, make things right." So then in verse 5, God begins to answer. "Look at the nations and watch, and be utterly amazed. For I'm going to do something in your days that you would not believe even if you were told. I'm raising up the Babylonians, that ruthless and impetuous people who sweep across the whole earth to seize dwelling places not their own. They are a feared and dreaded people. They are a law to themselves and promote their own honor. Their horses are swifter than leopards, fiercer than wolves at dusk. Their cavalry gallops headlong. Their horsemen come from afar. They fly like a vulture swooping to devour. They all come bent on violence. Their hordes advance like a desert wind and gather prisoners like sand. They deride kings and scoff at rulers. They laugh at all fortified cities. They build earthen ramps and capture them. Then they sweep past like the wind and go on. Guilty men whose strength is their God. So God gives his answer, and we're going to see that Habakkuk has a second response. "O Lord, are you not from everlasting? My God, my Holy One. We will not die. O Lord, you have appointed them to execute judgment. O Rock, you have ordained them to punish. Your eyes are too pure to look on evil. You cannot tolerate wrong. Why then do you tolerate the treacherous? Why are you silent while the wicked swallow up those more righteous than themselves? You have made men like fish in the sea, like sea creatures that have no ruler. The wicked foe pulls all of them up with hooks. He catches them in his net. He gathers them in his dragnet. And so he rejoices and is glad. Therefore he sacrifices to his net and burns incense to his dragnet. For by his net he lives in luxury and enjoys the choicest food. Is he to keep on emptying his net, destroying nations without mercy? I will stand my watch and station myself on the ramparts. I will look to see what he will say to me and what answer I am to give to this complaint." Before we finish up our reading, we see that he has said, here's what I want. There's so much injustice in the world. God, will you please bring justice? God, will you ever listen to any of my prayers and make a difference in this world? And God says, absolutely. I've heard everything you said. I'm going to bring exactly what you asked for. All those who have been doing wrong are going to be judged exactly as you wanted. And he says, I'm going to bring in the Babylonians, and they're going to sweep through not only your nation, but all the nations around you, everything you know, and they're going to punish all the evildoers that are everywhere. And he's like, no, that's not really what I meant. I just meant get rid of the bad guys and leave us good people around. You know, people like me and my friends. That's sort of what I'm hoping. You know, when I said I wanted a tall chick with long legs that agrees with everything I said, I didn't want an ostrich, and you know it. You know, I mean, it's that kind of a thing. You know, it's like, God, you knew what I meant, and you just did whatever you wanted to do. As we go through our lesson today, we're going to have to see, as we look at God's will, that's one of the first things as his followers we're going to have to understand and accept, that God really will do what God wills. That's going to be one of the biggest things. It is called the sovereignty of God, and it is one of the biggest principles about God. He's in control. We ask for something, and God says, I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it my way. And Habakkuk says, why would you send these evil people in? And so God replies to Habakkuk's second question. And the Lord replied, write down the revelation and make it plain on tablets, so that a herald may run with it. For the revelation awaits an appointed time. It speaks of the end, and it will not prove false. Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay. See, he is puffed up. His desires are not upright, but the righteous will live by his faith. Indeed, wine betrays him. He is arrogant and never at rest, because he is as greedy as the grave. And like death is never satisfied, he gathers to himself all the nations and takes captive all the peoples. Will not all of them taunt him with ridicule and scorn, saying, woe to him who piles up stolen goods and makes himself wealthy by extortion? How long must this go on? Will not your debtors suddenly arise? Will they not wake up and make you tremble? Then you will become their victim, because you have plundered many nations. The peoples who are left will plunder you. For you have shed man's blood, and have destroyed lands and cities and everyone in them. Woe to him who builds his realm by unjust gain, who sets his nest on high to escape the clutches of ruin. You have plotted the ruin of many peoples, shaming your own house and forfeiting their life. The stones of the wall will cry out, and the beams of the woodwork will echo it. Woe to him who builds a city with bloodshed and establishes a town by crime. God responds back. He says, you're right. I know what you wanted, and you're getting it. You're just not getting it in exactly the way that you expected. And I'm bringing in, you're right, worse people worse than you to bring judgment on you. But the time will come when they too will be judged. Fairness and justice and righteousness will prevail, God says, in this world. But the hard thing is that each of us, and this is a very difficult principle for almost every person everywhere, is this understanding that we want to judge almost everybody else by what standard? Us. We want to judge everyone by us. So if somebody's a little worse than us, what are they? Well, they're a terrible, horrible, god-awful person. And God, you got to do something about them. And let's just be honest. We might even know a few people more righteous than us. And if they are, well, that's self-righteous pain in the can. I mean, they're so stuck up and they're so fundamentalist and they've always got a better idea on everything. I'm so tired of that person. I mean, we are always the standard to judge things by. And if somebody doesn't match up exactly with us, there's a bit of a rift right there so often. What God is saying is, I have a righteous standard of my own, and I may send in judgment any way that I want. And if something comes in and they judge themselves unfairly, I will judge them too. God says you can always count on me to do what is right. And as we look at saying sort of what is a prophet said, Habakkuk, of I want this, we need to, as God's people, be very careful what we wish for. We've got to be careful, because sometimes it starts with something as simple as this, that we can start, and this is a lesson that every person everywhere needs to understand. The Bible says this, godliness with contentment is great gain. See, we already live in a country where the middle class here has more than almost anybody anywhere in the world. We are so blessed to live where we live. And so often, again, we compare to what we want or to the perfect or to Eden, and to instead of saying, God, looking around this world, we have so much. I mean, let's be honest. How many of you were born in this county? Go ahead, raise your hands. How many of you were born in this county? Okay, it looks like about 20% of you were born in this county, which means what? 80% of you or so decided to say, this is one of the prettiest places in the world. I could live here. And you decided, I might live here. Or probably about half of the 80% decided that. The other half, Uncle Sam said, this is a wonderful place. Come live here. As you looked at that. But, this is a beautiful place and a beautiful area and a wealthy country. And we are doing very well. And it's very hard for anybody, anywhere, to find contentment. But here's the thing. If you find contentment, you find peace. You find joy when you don't compare yourself to everyone else. But see, a lot of this complaining, a lot of this wishing for something else is what I have is not exactly what I want. God, I wish you would give me more still. God looked at the people as they were wandering around in the desert, and they said that. Does anybody remember what they were, what the Israelites were just before they started wandering around in the desert and left Egypt? They were slaves. They didn't have squat. They were beaten and mistreated, and their children were murdered. And then they get free, and then almost immediately they have what? They've got the clothes on their back, and they plunder Egypt, and they got all these nice clothes, and it says that God was going to let all those last, and they didn't get ruined. And does anybody remember when they were out in the desert, where did their food come from? Heaven. God sends them heaven food. It says later in the scriptures, they ate the same food that the angels eat. The same food that the angels eat. That's a pretty good meal. And then what do we see them start doing? It's just not enough. I need some variety in my diet. Angel food, there's got to be something better than angel's food. Now we had a good friend up in Canada that made this angel's food cake. Oh, I know. Barb's already going, ooh, yeah. And that was good. I'm not sure if you could make manna into angel food bread, into angel food cake, but when I get to heaven, I'm going to look Jill up and see if she can make manna into angel food cake. Because that stuff was the bomb. And I imagine if you use manna, it's going to be even better. And so one of the things that God's trying to teach us here is he looks at Habakkuk and says, be careful what you ask for, because I may answer your prayer in a way that is not exactly what you want. And don't be the kind of person that complains. You've got to find contentment.